And we are live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Avery Dennison webinar discussing how labels can meet the growing e-commerce challenge. My name is Justina. I'll be moderating today's session. I've got two colleagues with me today, Vincenzo Palumbo and Susanna Kokot, who are experts in e-commerce labeling, and they will walk you through today's agenda. But before we start, I want to share a few housekeeping rules with you. So first of all, the slide deck of today's presentation will be shared with you, and the session is also recorded. So by the end of today, you will receive an email with the slide deck and the recording. We also encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. The chat box that you can see on the right-hand side, it is off. However, if you scroll down below the presentation screen, you will see question box. So please type your questions in there. We will take a few questions throughout the session and we will leave the rest towards the end. If we are unable to ask all of the questions, we will get back to you after the session. And please keep in mind that the sessions, the questions are public, so everyone can see what you are typing in. That's it from me. Enjoy your session. Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sina, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. I hope you'll find it useful and informative. So before I start, let's quickly go through the agenda for our webinar today. So firstly, I will discuss some trends and market changes around e-commerce and everything connected with e-commerce, as well as touch upon the impact of COVID-19 crisis on e-commerce. Then, together with Vincenzo, we will discuss some solutions for labeling in e-commerce, such as direct thermal labels, gum twins, paper, transfer tapes, and piggybacks. And lastly, I will also touch upon how custom label constructions can support e-commerce in logistics. So moving to the next slide, thank you, Sina. Let's start a little bit picture of the pressure-sensitive market in Europe and e-commerce. So in 2019, the total market for PS labels in Europe was around 8 billion square meters. Around half of that was VI labels, or variable information labels. What exactly is that? Basically, any labels, they can be blank or pre-printed, and that allow to be printed again at the site of use. So I'm sure every one of you, either in your professional or personal lives, encountered those. For example, if you go grocery shopping, you use VI labels when weighing fresh produce and applying the price. So for VI labels in Europe, there are two segments which make up to around half of the total market. So one of them is transport and logistic, and the other is retail. And this is quite important for the topic of today's webinar, because e-commerce is a sort of an umbrella term of any transactions taking place online. However, when we talk about the actual physical product sales, which will be the focus of today's webinar, transport, logistic, and retail are really, well, key elements of this part of e-commerce. So in particular, with Vincenzo, we will talk about a bit more about the transport and logistics part. So moving to the next slide, let's discuss a little bit what are the trends and opportunities in the upcoming years for e-commerce, but also transport and logistics. So e-commerce for the past decade has been in Europe and also globally, but the speed will indeed improve and actually will accelerate in the coming years. So there are several things that impact that acceleration. So first of all, we see that there's e-commerce evolution. So retailers and consumers are becoming more sophisticated. Consumers want to have well, better access to different products. They know about more websites available. They have higher demands. They want more choice. They want faster delivery. So, of course, retailers need to adapt to that and make sure that the consumers are happy. We also see new customers migrating to online shopping from in-store. So, of course, the COVID crisis has significantly impacted this. But even before that, we saw that there are many segments that before have been reluctant to do online shopping are now moving to online. And again, that is connected primarily with the choice selection available, the price differences, the possibility to compare, but also pretty much the convenience. I mean, rather than actually leaving the house and having to buy something physically, you have to use some time, you have to, commute. With e-commerce, it's simply a couple clicks away from your item being delivered to your doors in the next day. We also see that there is a growth in online grocery shopping. So this is something that in the past years was primarily seen in the Central and Western Europe. And that was, on one side, physical retailers offering delivery of groceries to the house of the consumer. But also there's a boom for retailers who only operate online. So they only ship the goods, the groceries, to the customer directly. And while this trend has been visible, as you mentioned, in Central and Western Europe, we now see that consumers from the laggard markets, for example, Italy and Spain, where beforehand only around 3% of consumers were buying online, now are picking up. So overall, we see that e-commerce will grow, the consumer interest will grow, and together with that, transport and logistic required to accommodate that. Of course, in transport and logistics, critical part is labeling to making sure that the information is displayed correctly, and supply chain will grow with this as well. So moving to the next slide. We, of course, need to address the impact of COVID-19 crisis on e-commerce and transport and logistics. So as I, of course, mentioned a moment ago, e-commerce have been booming. Consumers quite often, because of lack of better options, were forced to migrate online. And actually, a lot of them now say that they prefer this way of purchasing online. So on average in the EU, around a quarter of consumers say that they purchase online at least once a month, with some markets like Ireland having almost 40% of consumers buying online once a month. But now we see that a lot of those new online shoppers don't want to change. They find it very convenient, very easy, and they prefer to do it this way. So another thing that's quite important is that beforehand, items that were usually purchased by consumers were household items, groceries, apparel, but now we see that there's more and more consumer electronics being purchased. So the markets are really expanding to new segments. As a result, supply chains are and probably will be under more stress and challenges. So during lockdown, it was a very unprecedented event at the beginning of the year. Many supply chains were suffering from really high demands, trying to make sure that the goods are delivered to customers in the timely manner. So in the future, we see that there will be a trend to rethink the supply chain logistics and how the items are delivered to consumers, both physically, I mean, in store, but also online. So the VI label industry serves a really important role to accommodating to the new challenges in supply chain, the new challenges that retailers face, to making sure that the information displayed is correct, that everything is labeled in the right way, and that items are being delivered to consumers fast. So Vincenzo, I give it now to you to talk a little bit more about the direct thermal labels.
Thank you, Susanna, for the introduction. I'm Vincenzo Palumbo, and I am the product manager for the bulk direct thermal paper portfolio at Avery, Dennison. As just mentioned a few minutes ago by Susanna, VI labels represent actually the biggest part of the label market in Europe. But if we look at the European VI label market, we see that the most used material is represented by paper face stock, where the direct thermal accounts for almost 43%, which means almost half of the market is served by direct thermal paper labels. So the question that we should raise is why the direct thermal paper is leading the VI label market. Basically, we can see on this slide the main benefit to use direct thermal paper compared to other alternative material. First of all, it's easy to use. We talk about a compact printing unit. There is only one consumables involved. Basically, there is no need of an additional consumable like the thermal transfer ribbon. there is a wider range of available and compatible printers. So we go from the mobile to the desktop up to the industrial print. It offers both high print speed and high image resolution. When we talk about high print speed, means that there is efficiency in operation, and this means saving in cost. When we talk about high image resolution, we can just confirm that the direct thermal is an excellent solution for barcodes and small text, and this is very, very important in the logistics segment for tracking and localization. The direct thermal is also offering a low cost for adoption compared to other printing technologies, and overall, it offers more efficiency in operation. As I said, basically, there is, for example, no disposal of the ribbon waste, and there is no changeover of the ribbon in that case. Moving to the next slide, I would like now to show in the next two slides some key requirements for the direct thermal paper label suitable for transportation and logistics. So these key requirements, the list of these requirements that you can actually see on this slide are also representing our internal test method to validate the performance of the material during the product development phase. For example, for logistics and transportation, we should definitely consider that the box is most of the time moved from an indoor warehouse to an outdoor environment where the actual shipment is actually happened. And for example, this might get also stored in containers or other environment where, for example, the humidity resistance is a very important requirement. Also, the label might get in contact with sunlight, for example, and we should consider the UV light resistance as another important requirement for direct thermal paper label. When we look at the whole logistic process, which involves storage, transportation, and delivery, the label might be also subject to some accidental scuffing, which can affect the variable information displayed on the label and also the barcode readability itself. Therefore, the scuffing resistance is another important requirement. In the meantime, I just mentioned indirectly another key requirement, which is the barcode readability itself. The reasons are pretty much obvious as we talk about the actual possibility to read the barcode through a certain device and even at a longer distance. The second slide about the requirement, if we move on. So one of the most important requirements for the converter in that case is the converting speed. We all know about that. And why that? Because usually in logistics, we focus mainly on a blank label where the converting job needs to run at the highest possible speed without causing any break during the conversion. Therefore, the converting speed is very, very important for the converter in this specific segment. Together with the converting speed, we have to mention, for example, the stiffness of the base paper itself, which should provide a certain tear resistance and should allow good performance in the dispensing of the label. This is a requirement mainly important for the end user rather than for the converter. The last but not least requirement on this slide is the plasticizer resistance. Usually, when we talk about plasticizer resistance, this is mainly required in the food application, but also in the logistic and transportation. Sometimes there might be, for example, the need to stick the label on a specific material like PVC. And the PVC, we know that contains plasticizers. And what it might happen that the label getting in contact with the plasticizer can cause an inverse chemical reaction. So basically, the image on the label might fade or might even discolor completely. Next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, basically, the technical requirements shown in the previous two slides are also representing our internal test method to validate the performance of our material during the product development phase. I'm going to talk now about the two main thermal top grades that we offer in our bulk portfolio in direct thermal. And we consider these two products as our recommended solution for logistics and transportation. And of course, this means that these two products have successfully passed our test. The first one is the well-known 200 GPFSE. This is one of our historical products in the direct thermal portfolio. It's already in the market since 15 years. But the question is why this material is our preferred choice for logistic and transportation segment. First of all, we should consider that it's coming with a top coat grade. So basically it offers protection under specific environmental conditions, such as UV light, water condensation, rain, and so on. Besides that, we should also highlight the direct thermal printability of this paper material because it's very good. Indeed, the barcode readability is classified with the enhanced grade A, which is actually the maximum rate that paper label can get for barcode readability. It offers also good scuffing resistance and very good resistance against humidity. So we are finding again the same requirement that I shortlisted and presented in a couple of slides ago. And beside that is also offering a good resistance to it. Last but not least, it offers also a certain resistance to plasticizer. And this is because there are some chemical components in the layer which will prevent any contact directly with the plasticizers. As I said, the material is definitely suitable for logistics and transportation, but we know, based on multiple feedback that we received from multiple customers, that this material is also successfully used in other applications, like, for example, moist weight scale, dry food, and bakery in general. So moving to the next one, besides this well-known grade already available in the market since 15 years, in order to answer the higher demand in logistic labeling, we have officially introduced last week, actually, a new grade suitable for logistic and transportation. And this is the new Thermal Top 200 GPL FSC. It's very, very similar to the existing 200 GP. It offers, for example, same performance against environmental agent, same good scuffing resistance, and same humidity resistance. There is just a slight difference, which is the better resistance to the oil compared to the existing 200 GP product. Next one. If we look, basically this is a decision matrix that we use to advise the best suitable product for the specific application. If we look at this wider offer in direct thermal portfolio in the bulk part of the business, we are able to serve the market with solutions that are not just covering the logistic and transportation application. In terms of requirement for logistic application, for example, we already understood that the market can be already well served using the 200 GP and the new 200 GPL. But say that our advice anyway will always go in the direction of the 200 GP and 200 GPL, even though we have other products available in our portfolio. This is mainly related to the logistic and transportation segment. The other range that we have are considered a little bit overspecified for logistic and transportation. But anyway, it should not prevent our converter and customers to use this grade also in logistic and application. Moving to the next one, I would like to spend actually a couple of words about the adhesive and not just about the paper material itself. Basically, when we talk about logistic application, our proposal for this kind of segment and in combination with the direct thermal material that I just presented, will always go in the direction of the S2045N adhesive. This is a well-known adhesive in the market. This is our bulk hot melt rubber-based adhesive. We should basically consider that when we talk about transportation and logistic, the label needs to get successfully applied on a specific substrate and needs to remain in place for the whole logistic and transportation process. In the majority of the case, we talk about a specific substrate which is mainly represented by cardboard boxes. So we talk about a substrate with a certain roughness. And for this reason, we can definitely advise that S2045N is the best adhesive to perform on cardboard boxes substrate. Say that this was the last information that I wanted to share about direct thermal paper. And maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Yes, actually, we've got a couple of questions here. So, first one, is there any other direct thermal paper with sustainable credentials available in the portfolio, regardless of logistic application?
Very, very interesting questions. Basically, during Label Expo last year, we presented our RDT Eco, which is a direct thermal eco with recycled content. This is a product that we are going to officially introduce in the market in the upcoming weeks. And basically, we are actually proud that we've been the first one in the market who launched the first direct thermal paper with recycled content. So at the moment, this is a unique solution in the market. We have trial material available in case somebody's interested. And of course, this will offer a very high green credential in terms of sustainability.
Okay, excellent. And I've got one more. Actually, I've got two more. So let's maybe start with this one. Thanks for interesting topic. Is thermal eco not suitable for transport use?
Basically, the thermal eco can be used for transport and logistics. Of course, we need to take in consideration the specific requirement for the application. Usually, as you might have looked on one of the previous slides where there was the matrix, the thermal eco is the lowest performing product because it's suitable basically for, thank you, Justina, it's suitable actually for dry surfaces, and it offers a kind of UV light resistance only for short term. So if we talk about kind of application like internal logistics for short period of time, then we can also use the thermal eco grade. But of course, as long as the application will become higher demanding, then we should move to a more higher performing grade like the 200 GP and the 200 GPR. But as I say, nothing should prevent you and the end user to use the thermal eco in logistic application.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll move to the next part and then we'll take rest of the questions at the end of the session.
Yeah, so
Susanna?
thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you, Justina. So that was a really great overview of the direct thermal papers, and I think, yeah, these are absolutely key labels to use in this type of application. However, on my side, I would like to talk a little bit more about the engineered solutions for custom constructions in e-commerce. So let's first look, why would you actually need to use engineered solution in e-commerce? So especially when it comes to internal logistic or warehousing purposes, there is a need for accurate information transfer. So especially, well, when relying on staff, on warehouse workers, sometimes it might happen that there's human error when transferring information. Of course, you want to prevent that as much as possible. So engineered solutions can help with that. Also, speed and efficiency. Of course, with high volume logistics, high volume products, you want to be as fast and as accurate as possible to make sure you can serve as many customers as needed. In some businesses, some retailers actually in the past few years started investing in automation, including RFID labels and RFID readers. And that is, again, a really great way to improve the speed and efficiency of internal logistic. Sometimes, of course, retailers sell high-value items which require additional levels of security, additional levels of protecting the package, protecting the items from being lost or from being damaged. So for all of that, engineered solutions can enable those drivers. So first of all, let's address what actually are engineered solutions. So Justina, if you can go, yes, thank you, to this slide. So very simply, these are just custom label constructions. So they're not your standard face stock adhesive liner. They're a little bit more complex than that. So I will go into more detail exactly of what the constructions are and how they can actually serve the purpose they need to in the next slides. But this is just for your information, so you can familiarize yourself. So starting with piggyback labels. So these labels pretty much consist of the standard face adhesive liner layers, but have an added adhesive and another liner. So you can refer to these as sort of multi-layer or label-on-label constructions. So basically, what you can do with those labels is you can take the bottom liner off and apply it on the initial surface. Then, if needed, you can take a part of that label and then reapply it elsewhere. So in that way, the original label sticks on the surface, the first surface, and then the second part of the label can be reapplied elsewhere too. Well, a box, for example. So, Justina, if you can go to the next slide, thank you. So, yes, the main application is exactly in logistics. So, for example, in ship and track purposes, administration, or inventory management. So, you can see those labels, for example, being used exactly in administration, inventory management, where the initial label is applied on cardboard boxes, which contain certain number of products. And then if the box is empty, and the warehouse worker needs to reorder, you can simply peel off a part of that label with information about this particular product and apply it on a reorder form. So that is a really fast way to, well, pretty much manage the inventory and making sure that the product order is exactly as needed. Also, as you can see on the photo here, this can be used when you transfer items from one larger container to smaller containers and you want to label it. So in this case, you can use simply a barcode to identify the product. So this is really a very efficient way to manage your stock in bulk. So going to the next slide, Justina. Thank you. So the key feature and the key benefit of using piggyback labels is improved stock management, traceability, and basically labeling of products, especially inside the house. Of course, because you can transfer the information quite easily, you can reduce the human error in the warehouse management. Again, a great benefit when you work with high volumes. A benefit of using the piggyback labels in all engineered solutions is that they can be quite literally engineered. So you can combine different face stocks, different adhesives or liners just to fit your needs and to make sure that the product fits exactly the specification and the end application of your end user. So some face stock combinations that we offer is vellum, the direct thermal paper that Vincenzo spoke about, MC, and many others, not only paper, but also filmic. So this is a really great label that has been used by our customers, has received really good feedback, and does indeed help in the inventory management. So moving to the next slide, these two constructions I will be talking about are a little bit different. So let's start with gum twins. So gum twin well, consists of the same amount of layers as a piggyback, but in this case, it serves more of a, well, you can say a double-sided tape. So you have liners of both sides of the construction and between of adhesive and a face stock. So in this case, face stock acts a little bit like a carrier for the adhesive, and the liners, of course, can be removed upon lamination or upon end use. So the great benefit of gum twins is that they allow for creating custom labels at the site of the label converter. So if you need to add a special face stock or anything else, using gum twin is a great option. An additional benefit is that you have two layers of adhesive. So if you need to have one adhesive different to another, for example, removable and permanent, or serving different purposes for different substrates, you can absolutely combine that. So the next one is transfer tape, and this one is more straightforward. This is quite literally just a layer of adhesive in between two liners. So similarly to gum twins, transfer tape can be used to create custom construction the label converter, for example, when it comes to security or just applying any other treatment to the label. So going to the next slide, let's look a little bit about where these construction can be applied. So they are a little bit similar, but they can be used in different applications. So gum twins can help create removable labels with added functionality of having the face stock, making it a little bit more tear resistant. Transfer tape is a great use for special face stock material, for example, security labels, or if there's, again, need for additional treatment of the label. But what those two have in common is that they can be used to create custom RFID labels. And this is quite critical when it comes to e-commerce and logistics. RFID, if you're familiar with the topic, has been used for many years now to improve the efficiency of operations, to really in a fast way track the inventory and reduce the error. So the way gum twins operate, and transfer tape in this case, is that sometimes with your standard RFID labels, they don't necessarily fit the purpose you need. And that's not because there's something wrong with them, but it's because the surface that you may apply it to, or maybe the conditions that these RFID labels need to be applied on, they don't necessarily, the wet inlays are not simply doing the job as they should. So moving to the next slide, Justina. Let's look a little bit more about how gum twins and transfer tapes can really support RFID implementation for those more challenging applications. So as I mentioned, high demanding surfaces is one of them. So your typical permanent adhesive, while it may work great on majority of substrates, sometimes there may be a very rough or a very apolar surface that requires a different adhesive. So by using a transfer tape or a gum twin with this particular adhesive, you can create an RFID label that fits exactly the purpose. Similarly, if there's special exposure or special application condition, using these constructions with a special adhesive, or in case of gum twins, having the extra layer of face soak to make sure that the label is actually very sturdy, will really help in for the RFID label to serve its purpose. Similarly, creating functional labels, for example, removable labels, is possible with gum twins. So the RFID label can be simply laminated, an adhesive on one side, and removable on the other. So, for example, if you apply this particular label directly on an item that you later on need to remove, this can be done, and this will leave no trace. Lastly, complex die cutting needs. So there are certain labels which are a little bit tricky when it comes to the die cutting. For example, the rat tail labels, which are commonly used on rings. So in many cases like this, a standard wet RFID inlay won't be the most appropriate. So in this case, you would want to use either a gum twin or a transfer tape to make sure that the label and the shape of the label is correct. So all in all, engineered solutions can really support implementation of not only RFID, but also just implementation of the correct supply chain management and the warehouse management, and really make sure that you take your operations to the next level. Vincenzo, anything from your side?
Well, actually, I think that the audience noticed that we are able to serve both parts of the business. So we have the basic product for logistic and transportation, which are the one falling in the bulk area of our portfolio. And beside that, for higher demanding application, we can look at the engineered and custom solution. Say that, of course, I also mentioned something else about sustainability. So, for example, the unique product in the market, which is RDT Eco with recycled content. So I think in this webinar we covered the both part of the business, basic and high demanding application.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. We can now move to the Q&A session. So for those who joined later and missed the introduction, you can type in your questions. If you scroll down below the presentation screen, you will see a question box and you can type your questions in there. We already have a few questions, so we can start, I believe, with Vincenzo, with the first one. Is the new 200 GPL already commercially available? How long would it take to get some material?
Well, yes, the 200 GPL has actually been officially introduced last week, so is already commercially available. We have a service program in Exact available, so next day delivery, I will say.
Okay, great.
And we have also trial material in case there is a need to make a test, to run some tests.
Okay, great. Okay, and I believe the next one is for Susanna. What is the delivery time and minimum order volume for piggyback labels?
So it really quite depends. So for some, well, most popular piggyback labels, we can offer a next day delivery actually, and MOQ is as low as 970 square meters. Of course, the more complex the labels, the longer time it requires. However, the standard lead time for even the complex labels should be 7 days. So we try and deliver the engineered product to you as quickly as possible. Of course, if you want to inquire exactly what is needed for your particular label application, you can always get in touch with our technical sales team or the sales team generally. But yes, it can be as quickly as next day.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and one more. Which is better to use for RFID labels, gum twins or transfer tapes?
I think that's a really good question. And again, it depends. So there can be both really great to use, and depends a lot of what is the purpose of the RFID label, where will this be applied, what are the conditions. So for many applications, a transfer tape would be good enough. It's just a layer of adhesive that can be combined with a dry RFID inlay to create the custom label. However, I know that some of our converters like to use gum twins because of the additional layer of the face stock. And the face stock makes the label a little bit more sturdy, well, more functional, but also just, well, improves the performance of the label on the surface. So it really depends. I think both of them have really great benefits. Transfer tapes can sometimes be a little bit more cost effective. But overall, it depends really on the application. Again, both can be equally good.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one more for Vincenzo. How is GPL positioned in terms of prices to 200 GP?
Pricing topic, something probably to discuss directly with the sales representative. But high level, I would say that the 200 GPL and 200 GP stayed at the same level because, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we introduced this 200 GPL to answer the higher demand in logistics. So it's actually offering the same performance as 200 GP, is an equivalent of 200 GP. Therefore, we should position the product at the same level of the existing 200 GP.
Okay. Okay, we can always get back to Roxana after the presentation with some more details on the exact pricing. Okay, it looks like it was the last question. So I will just thank you for attending. Thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you, Susanna. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, all of you will receive the slide deck and the recording of today's presentation within the next few hours. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you at our next webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.